All right, let's do now the do's and the don'ts. Good research conduct. So before we go into the research, I think you as a researcher have roles as a supervisor, right? So when there is a big project, undergrad students start coming with you as well. Master's students start coming, working with you. So the researcher not only has a responsibility as a researcher, but also has a responsibility as a supervisor. So make your research count, publish ethically. Yeah. So remember these 4 principles: communalism, universalism, disinterestedness, and organized skepticism. Okay, we start, from publishing. And then after publishing, so this is kind of the ethical side of it, not the technical part of publishing. The part we discussed this morning is more of which journals to target and how to address. But now here we see a different aspect, which is the communism aspect for publishing peer-reviewed journals or a book or a monograph. We have talked about the purpose of publication: to contribute knowledge, to build on other research, to scrutinize and discuss the results by the scientific community, to assess contributions of research, example during evaluation of positions, and citation also influences research applications. Now, this is one requirement when you publish your paper: disclosures. Any ties or dependencies that might exist must be disclosed. Okay? So do you have financial interest in the paper that you are writing and submitting? Have you ever seen, so anyone who submitted, there are disclosure statements. Journals ask you for these disclosure statements. If you have any financial ties that are linked to the funder of the institution, for example, so you're working there, etc., you have to declare that. Individuals, so bodies providing financial support for the work. If the research is commissioned, the commissioning organization should be named. If it's supported by a certain pharmaceutical industry, it has to be stated in the paper, in the acknowledgement section or funding section. How the researcher builds on other work, both theoretical and empirical. I mean, this goes without saying. Background materials and conclusions. You have to be honest and clear account of background to the study, proper quoting and referencing of earlier publications. We discuss this indirectly. You should not hide other people's work. You have to quote other people's work. You have to cite them, and you have to follow standard citation. Clear description of the materials and the methods. The experiment, like we discussed yesterday, if it was an experiment, you have to explain how the samples has been done, what kind of cares you have used. It should allow other experts to assess the scientific significance of the results. And also, it should be based on empirical and statistical methods. So this is a bit of repetition from yesterday, but at least it was discussed as a part of the research method. The experimental results should be reproduced and retested. Okay, all your results, someone was saying 25% or 30% of the results do not replicate. You see that problem actually very often. Sometimes you might have heard, there's no need to mention the name. One co-author, a very well-known person actually, they wrote a paper and published it. So the predictions in the data, actually it's a cross-country data. So they, based on that result, they found some results and they said that, well, then debt matters for a country when the debt to GDP ratio is above this threshold level. That's a key finding. Paper was cited so many times.
70%.
Yeah, something like that. Then, one PhD student downloaded the file and started running those codes, and you see that a code has a significant error. That means one country was skipped from that data. If you include that country, the result will change. So it become a big issue. So these kinds of things, this is not a replication error, but you have to understand that people will do that later. So your model should be guided by your conceptual framework. You have to have clear hypothesis, and you have to document all your data cleaning and code files properly. So they should be retested. How is the sample size determined? Power analysis, etc. All this should be discussed. Non-experimental studies, historical discipline, source material, support for any claims must be presented. Presentation and conclusion should be balanced and fair, and they should, most importantly, be based on what you have written in the paper. Pre-registering studies has become standard in many reputable journals, especially experimental studies. Remember this, if you by any chance are going to go to the field and collect experimental data, you have to register it. I showed you the site yesterday. It's called the AR registry site. I think there are other registration sites as well. They respond in 2 to 3 days. When you submit this, they have a format. You follow that format and describe what the experiment is about, what are the hypotheses, what's the intervention, when is the starting date, the ending date, etc. So it guarantees publication no matter what the results are. So you see, now the Journal of Development Economics actually started publishing, acknowledging publication, that guaranteeing publication. You submit your pre-analysis plan, not the results, before the experiment. This is the experiment, this is what the data is going to look like. You submit that, and then when the results come, you don't have any statistical significant results. Still, the journal will publish it, because they're not interested in statistically significant results. They are interested in the results. So registering has these kinds of benefits. If you don't register, because people will not be able to tell how you generated that data, and you will not be able to publish it in good journals. There's another task called the third task, which is the media. Researchers usually involved with the media, and the media always likes, because they need news stories. So this is particularly a sensitive issue in medical research. Universities are expected to cooperate with society to inform the general public about the research. This is called the third task, often achieved through the media. It is actually an important part, especially when you are applying for higher level promotions like professorship, for example. You need to mention that, have you been doing service to the community? Have you been in the media commenting, blogs, and etc.? So don't underestimate it. In your early stage, it might not be that necessary, but as you advance in the upper level, it is required. If you don't have any, you might be denied your promotion, so it's very critical. But it has its own risk. The media's task is to discover and transmit what goes on openly or below the surface, what is under development. Keen interest in findings that challenge existing wisdom. If there is a new research that turns everything upside down, they would be very interested, because the media has its own interest. They are they're interested in attracting audience. But you as a researcher should not be carried away with that. Researchers should understand this. You should not be put off by a blunt and oversimplified presentation of the results in the media. Okay? People might talk about, they pick it up from Nature, and say like, new research from this guy, that guy says this. They will probably take out a couple of lines and misrepresent the result that makes a story, a nice story for them. They're not, you may be interested in exactly communicating the whole research. In that case, what do? You should neither feel the media pressure and announce the results prematurely. And if they are actually misquoting your results, we had to do that actually in one research. It's a UK, very good big journal. Actually, they picked up, and then we did research on meditation, and they said that meditation doesn't have any effect. But we didn't say that. We said that we didn't find effect on these specific outcome variables. So we had to make that correction. So public trust is very important, and research funding comes from the public. So informing the public is very important, and discussing topical scientific issues brought up by the general news debates are also very important. And so you have to really value your relationship with the media, but it's very important to be careful not to get carried away. Next issue is publishing. Open access publication has become increasingly important, but still there's a big problem. These big journals, the journals that I mentioned, most of them are owned by some publishing companies. So once you submit your paper, unfortunately, if you want it to be free open access, they charge you exorbitant amount of money. For example, I think like the top field journals or something like that, they charge you, do you want me to tell you the figure, how much they charge you? USD. So otherwise, it will not be open access. So 3,500 to 4,000, some of them, or $5,000. So what you do, you have to think about that, because open access is good because many people will reach, it will reach many individuals. But if it is in the journal's website locked in, that you have to have a subscription, then people in developing countries will not be able to read it. So you have to have other strategies. I started like last year on Twitter sharing this new research because I see that nobody has access, but very often most of economics papers have a working paper version. Sometimes the working paper version is not substantially different. You publish it as a working paper, and then you publish it as a paper. So what I do is I was tweeting about the paper, and then I tweet first, and then put in a link for the working paper version. So at least you will have a chance to read the working paper version. So open access is very important to our institution, so we need to do some things about it, but still, you know, universities in the developing countries are in a huge disadvantage on that, because these firms require thousands of dollars in subscription to allow it for your students. So we have to find a way. But on the other hand, you cannot focus on those open access predatory journals as well, because some of the journals that are predatory journals, they're really not good quality. So even if they're open access, it really doesn't mean that much. I mean, it's not going to improve your reputation. OECD and EU and other funders require open access of research funded by them. My research, most of it was funded by the Swedish government, SIDA. So they need open access. So what is the best way to do it open access? Just right before the paper is accepted in the journal, you also publish it in your working paper series. All right? Of course, you cannot post exactly the same paper with the journal's log and, you know, the journal's logo and everything in your working paper version. That will be violation of copyright. Because the moment you submit your paper and approved, they will ask you to sign a copyright form. Right? So you cannot put it out, but without, you know, that paper or a slightly different version of previous version, you can put it out as a working paper version, including the data to replicate and everything. And that's good for you as well, because then people will have access to your work and they will be able to cite it. So you should follow, they follow the 2003 Berlin Declaration of Open Access to Scientific Knowledge. It has benefits for students. Teachers can use them freely for educational purposes. Disadvantage, it might cost the author additional money. Of course, if you want to publish it in the journal and pay this, of course, it will cost you additional money. But sometimes in project grants, you can include that cost. So you might be able to pay it. Yes, Jan?
When you do publish a working paper,
yes,
and someone cites that working paper, but you later also publish that working paper,
yes, yes,
do those working paper citations count towards the total?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the way to do it would be, so you have Google Scholar profiles. You go to Google Scholar and you can merge them. That's the way to do it. Everybody should have a Google Scholar page. You have to open. That's a very good way. Google Scholar, I think LinkedIn is also good. But Google Scholar counts your citations. So it's a very good way to have that.
On submitting the working paper.
Yes.
So when you submit the working paper, did you submit the paper?
Yes. So the working papers are, they're not peer-reviewed. So working papers is work in progress pretty much. So when you have decent results and decent version of the paper, you share it with the public. So you do it mostly through your institution. ERSA has, for example, working paper version. Your university should have one. You publish it in the university. Then when it comes to journal, then it depends on your aspiration, the quality, and the level of the publication or the manuscript. If you think that's a good journal that is worth trying in a top field or a general interest journal, then you decide that with your supervisor or co-author. Sometimes I've realized that immediately sharing your working paper is not a good idea. You have to really get comments, at least from the reviewers or something. Sometimes this is what I do as well. It's perfectly fine to do it. The reason is, after revision, the paper might change substantially. So the two papers are no longer similar. That can happen. So in that case, it would be very difficult for people to see. Sometimes the results can be also negative, conflicting, because a reviewer might have suggested a new test, or to include some variables or not, to use a different model, and the results might have changed. The conclusion might have changed, although the research question remains the same. So in that case, the best way to wait is submit it to a journal. Once you get comments, you address all those comments, let's say it's rejected. So before you submit it to the next journal, you publish it as a working paper version. I realized, I think, through experience that that's the best way to do it. Then you will avoid, the major differences in the two versions. Sometimes some reviewers also violate the anonymity principle. Also, and they go and check the working paper version as well. So it's very important to see all these possibilities. Publication counts in promotion, but breaking down, so there are some ethical issues with publication. So we didn't cover that part. That's why we're talking about it. No breaking down research into smaller publishable units. Remember the World Bank Economic Review paper that I told you about. The main outcome variables are: one is charcoal consumption, then CO2 emission, then deforestation, then cooking time. Can you imagine if I write 4 papers, one focusing on cooking time, one focusing on deforestation? It's crazy. You wouldn't be able to publish it in a top journal anyway if you break it into that small pieces. But some people do that. This is like dividing the paper into 4 smaller pieces. This is what we call it's an ethical practice. This is very unethical research practice. It makes it difficult to check the results of the research. This can lead to misleading results. Readers may think that the different results came from different studies. It was one RCT. So the results of that RCT should be reported in one good paper. And as always, remember, quality is always better than quantity. If you want to participate in international conferences and etc., for example, you submitted a paper sometimes to a conference and they want to give you a scholarship to come and present. They kind of like the paper is, it's a little bit so-so, but who is this person anyway? Let me check the Google Scholar publications. You're publishing in those really low-level journals. They might say someone else is publishing in at least 1 or 2 of these decent journals. Then they will give the scholarship to the other person. So it's very important to have a decent focus of quality. I'm not saying that we should get crazy and focus on the top journals only, because that require a lot of capacity and connections and everything. But at least we need to focus on reasonably decent level journals. Those journals by our level are second tier or field journals somehow. Even third tier field journals are still okay for most of these institutions. Generally, results from a study should be presented in a comprehensive report, which is 1. If the results are reported in different pubs, there should be a clear reason and cross-references should be given. That's why if you produce 2 separate results, then you have to mention one in the other as well, and the relationship should be explained as well. Duplicates publications should also be avoided. If done for reasons, it should be stated clearly. I really don't know, because this material is, like I told you, multidisciplinary. That's why, but in economics, there is no duplication of publication. It's a no-no. You publish one paper, and you publish slightly modified version in a different journal with pretty much the same results. This is duplication of papers. There were big scandals of international professors in economics, in the top schools actually, without naming these individuals. You can Google them. This is called paper cloning. They cloned the paper. And their reputation was destroyed for good. Because publishing one paper into 3-4 journals by changing just one variable and etc., it's not a good idea. A biometric model used to allocate research funding to universities, because the reason is very simple. Because people were trying to use shortcuts to take advantage of this. Because when you produce more papers, your citation will be higher, you get more rewards from your department in compensation. ERSA pays compensations for each publication. So you see, these kinds of incentives are the reason actually why people are doing that. But that's really a bad idea, because at the end of the day, we all will lose from that, because everyone else will start doing the same. At the end of the day, you've heard about the tragedy of the commons. That will be tragedy of the commons. A researcher's contribution is measured by citation, not by the number of publications. So citation by other authors, not by the same author. So your citation by other authors is important. But this is also a misunderstood concept. Who is citing your work is also very important. What kind of people, what kind of journals are citing your work? Because there's what we call discipline-adjusted citation index as well. Google Citation actually tells you who cites your paper. Some of them might be agricultural science papers. Some of them might be gender studies. It's good. which shows that your research is reaching to these areas. But if it is only cited by these people and your economics colleagues are not citing that paper, what does that mean? You're not contributing to your field. So you have to have a balance between these two. So, but at the end of the day, if the publication doesn't have any value whatsoever in the biotech model, it doesn't have that much value if it's not cited. So citation is also important. If it's good paper and published in good journal, I promise you it will be cited. Co-authorship. This is a fun part. It's very important to know all these things right before you start co-authoring the papers. The author is responsible for the content of the publication presenting her or his research, the methods, the validity, the reliability of results, but also the quality of the manuscript. So you're responsible for everything in that paper. If you're 3 people, all 3 of you are responsible. If there is an ethical practice that's found out by one of the co-authors, the reputation of the other co-authors will also be destroyed. So it's very important to be aware of this. You should also check the terms of the publisher. Like this exactly what now she asked. References and quotations should be correct. You should feel the responsibility to make corrections if, for example, the results are exaggerated by the media. Right? You should make comments. You should not cite only studies that support proposition, but also against, and try to respond to them. So when you cite papers, you shouldn't cite papers that kind of support your hypothesis. In fact, if it is, there are other studies that say actually the opposite, it's helpful for you because you are contributing to a very hot discipline where we need more research. There's no need to take side. Actually, there are 2 opposing views on the impact of improved cook stoves on cooking time. Some say that it reduces cooking time. Some find that it doesn't. So the reasons might be because these studies were conducted in different contexts with different measurements. And I'm coming up with this contribution to solve this controversy. You have written a very important paper. So it's very important to focus on both sides of the story. You collaborate, co-create, and cooperate in co-authorship, so it's a good thing. But there are some issues that you have to be aware. It's very important to signal who actually did the scientific work. Okay? This is a critical part. It's helpful to evaluate the publication, like the quality of the publication, and the researchers applying for a position assessed by their publication, among other things. When I got promoted to a professorship, I was asked actually to verify what my contributions were, and my co-authors had to sign on it. So you have to expect that to happen. Even if it's like 3 of us in that paper, our names are listed alphabetically, but I did probably 60% of the work. I estimate that it's probably 70% of the work. The other co-authors did the remaining 15. In some journals, there is a declaration. I don't know if you have seen. Have you seen that? Declaration of the contributions? Okay, I can show you one as an example. This is like one example for you have right at the end. You have that each author, 2 of us, they have conceptualization, formal analysis, funding, acquisition, data, writing, original draft, writing, review, and editing. The next co-author, conceptualization, formal analysis, writing, original draft. So you list these, that clearly gives signal like who did somehow what, or who participated more. So it's very important to be aware of that. So it must be clear who bears the responsibility in case of misconduct as well. Well, but generally, I think everyone is responsible. But the senior authors might take more responsibility, especially if it is a clinical trial and etc. But usually it's everyone who involved. If it is plagiarism, for example, and things like that. But other aspects, I will come to them. So 2 things that you should never forget. No one is listed as an author who shouldn't be. They shouldn't be an author, but they are in the paper. This is violation of authorship ethical guidelines. No one who should be listed as an author is omitted as well. That means someone contributed as an author, but you did not include them. This is again ethical violation. The key decisions in the authorship is who should be listed as an author and how should the names of the authors be ordered. So these are the things that you have to ask at the time you want to submit. The first question has been discussed at a great length internationally. That means who should be listed. Okay? Did they contribute or not? But an influential group of journal editors attempted to formulate a guidelines called the Vancouver Rules. Vancouver Rules. The uniform requirement for manuscripts submitted to biomedical journals. The authorship credit should be based on, remember these three requirements. So we're answering the first question. What's the first question? Who should be? A co-author. The next question would be, how should be the name? Ordered. One, each author should have substantial contributions to conception, design, acquisition of data, or analysis and interpretation of data. Drafting the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And final approval of the version to be published. Each author should meet conditions 1, 2, and 3. So you know who to include in your paper as a co-author. They should involve in all aspects substantial contributions to conception, design, acquisition of data, analysis, and interpretation of the data. You see, there's a or here. So either interpret the data, acquire the data, and also design, or interpret the data. So it doesn't mean that they have to sit down and do statistical codes and analyze the data necessarily. It's good if that is the case. Draft the article for revising critically for important intellectual content and final approval of the version to be published. All authors should meet 1, 2, and 3. Okay, then there's multiple authorship. Okay, if it's one co-author, one person, that's okay. It's sole authored paper, so there's authorship is not an issue. But if there are other people involved, collecting some patient data and providing a limited input, for example, is not sufficient to be an author. Okay? It should rather be in the acknowledgement section. But such an acknowledgement should be approved by the person in question. Alternative approach, list everyone who is involved in the work and state what they have done. This is one option, but we don't do it in economics. I think this is mostly in science and things. And if the objective is to reduce the number of authors, use the first criteria. That means include those who contributed using the Vancouver guideline. If the objective is to reflect authors' contribution, use the second criteria. So it's very important to be aware of what the contribution of each author. The second important aspect is ordering of names. Its practices, the practice is different in the different disciplines. In economics, if we contributed equally, actually it's very rarely that people contribute equally, but let's say that it's equal, almost equal, then it's alphabetical. All right, and you can declare that as well. But people with a name that starts with A will be privileged. People with names that starts with W, like Wallenberg and things, they're screwed. There will always be the last person to be listed. So this creates its own unfair advantage to the people whose name starts early. They will always be listed first. But if you're not comfortable with that, in some journals, they, in economic journals, they say that let's randomize the name. Randomize means randomly pick one name, that would be the first, second, and then you state that. These people all contributed, but the name was randomized. That was introduced to protect these kinds of people whose name starts with R or W. Sometimes they might end up first. Ziegler, exactly. Ziegler will be... So the conventional approach is alphabetical listing unless one of the authors substantially contributed. If not alphabetical, it's assumed that the first person made a significant contribution carries more credit. In science, that's how it is. In economics, that's not how it is. In many science, like medicine, where involve chemistry, where there's a lot of lab work. They're like lab assistants who are running the lab, the person who brought the money. They're like sometimes 10 people co-authors. The first person usually is the person who did most of the work. That's one tradition. But in economics, usually it's alphabetical, or if you contributed more, your name should come first. But it's very important to have these laid out before co-authorship issues. Okay, we'll co-author this. Okay, how are we going to co-author? How are we going to divide the responsibility? Very often it goes very smoothly. It goes very smoothly, but you have to talk about it in advance because people assume things sometimes. So some journals allow declaration of equal co-authorship, or like the journal that I told you before as well, ask for the contributions for each author, and then each author should sign up. In the biometric method, however, the ordering of the authors does not really matter. I mean, in the citation, it will be cited pretty much equally. Usually this becomes an issue when? When is it? Promotion, exactly, when you are being promoted. So if you have really nice papers and all of them you have very senior authors appearing in the first name, so you get very little credit for that work. In Gothenburg, in places like Berkeley as well, we don't allow actually PhD students to co-author papers with supervisors, especially their job market paper. We have a paper style called like 3 papers. Okay, you got 3 papers. Out of these 3, so like paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3, paper 1 or 2 or one of these would be what we call the job market paper. This is the paper that shows your contribution, the major work that you did. You cannot co-author that with your supervisor. You can if you want, but if you do that, what happens? People will always think that it's mostly the supervisor's work. So it will create a problem for you to get a job. So that's the practice down there. But some make significant contribution to the work effort during the research itself, but is not given the option of becoming an author. And this is not fair. More problematic when they contributed to the writing and are excluded from the authorship. This is something that you have to be very careful. If excluded from the authorship due to misunderstanding or personal conflict, it's not ethically acceptable. So usually in every project there's a lead person, the person who's leading the project. It will be the responsibility of this person not to create any friction about that and have an open discussion about co-authorship. If excluded because of contributions are deemed insignificant, it may be hard to come up with a proof, so it will be a conflict. So one remedy is have a clear agreement about the conditions of authorship and even document these agreements. You agreed co-authorship would be decided based on contributions. And how do we measure our contributions? We have all the email correspondences on the files that we worked on and everything. It goes up to that kind of level in very extreme cases. After all, we are co-authoring with the people that we like, right? It's very rarely that we co-author with the people that we've never met before or something. So our personal relationship with that person also matters as well. Sometimes you let it go as well. I did most of the work, but we take equal co-authorship, it's fine. I value my friendship with Jan. He's a cool guy. We enjoy drinking beer together, hiking, so that's fine. But if he didn't do shit and he wants to be listed as first co-author, I was like, no, Jan, that's not going to work. I used as an example.
Yeah. So I think a way that I use to circumvent this issue is all of my research projects are make use of Git. And with Git, you can exactly track who does what. Because you can see the commits that people make and how they save files.
Yes.
And I think that's something that, computer scientists do that.
Git is kind of a platform. It's a project platform.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like another one, a Slack. That's one that I work is Asana, I think. You collaborate with that, and Dropbox as well. Dropbox has its own logs. Who changed what, when, all these version histories as well. So it's good to have these backup plans for unlikely conflict. Have you heard of these plans? In unlikely event of loss of cabin pressure, Oxygen mass will be dropped, but that never happened. It's the same is true for co-authoring as well, conflicts when it comes to co-authorship as well. Sometimes the senior authors, we kind of back off as well, even if we did a little bit more work, because the students needs it for their job market, so it's okay if they are lead authors. But remember, there's a fine balance between small things don't matter versus violating the ethics principle. If I wrote all the paper and then I put the PhD students to be the lead author, that's an ethical practice by itself as well, right? So we're not being truthful about each and everyone's contributions. So publishing results. The publisher, this is also the responsibility of publishers. I mean, if you, by any chance, start working as an editor and etc., this is for that part. So the publisher of a scholarly journal has responsibility to ensure that existing rules are followed. Leading international journals now require evaluation of the project by ethics committees, so it's become a norm, particularly for research that involves human or animal subjects, and especially if it is experimental. So you have to register it, and the editor have a responsibility to verify that, and also the reviewers. So the journal editor carries really great responsibility for the scientific quality of the manuscript. And of course, should consult experts like reviewers, especially. Editors have never heard of a case where an editor accepted a paper without consulting reviewers. They will always consult reviewers. Often it appears difficult to publish papers with negative results, negative or null results, unexpected. Still, it's a problem. That's what resulted in this unethical practice in tweaking the t-values or changing. Stating clear hypothesis should be important, and then the results should be published even if the hypothesis is not supported. We talked about this previously. JD and other journals nowadays do this. So the editor has responsibilities as well to ensure that all these ethical guidelines are followed. I think we can pause a little bit here and do some group work. Right? Any questions? I think the authorship thing might have touched some nerves, eh?
So, Prof, are you saying that the kind of method I'm kind of familiar with is that when it comes to contribution, someone basically does like the theoretical framework and someone else does the methodology and then someone else compiles everything.
Yes.
And then with the standard given by the Vancouver guidelines, we all have to contribute to each section.
Yeah, but we say that it doesn't mean that you have to involve in every section strictly. I would say because we always have complementary skills, especially if it is a theory plus empirics paper. Some of the people are good in the econometric side, they will write that part, the other part. But the most important thing is that they have to have some critical input in the manuscript. Sometimes they are more in selling the paper, so the senior author would write the introduction. It's only 2 pages or 3 pages of the paper, but it's the most important section. That's how it should be judged.